Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Good morning. Bienvenidos. Good morning. Welcome to Laney College. I'm so pleased to have you here. It's a blessing. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Tamil Gilkerson, and I have the honor and privilege of being in this space with you all today. I really do feel so humbled by the opportunity to be in spaces with other practitioners who are really trying to do the work on the ground, to be thoughtful and mindful about how we serve students. I serve as the president of Laney College, which is another incredible honor to be here in this community, in this beloved community. Working and striving toward a beloved community is really at the core of what we're doing here at Laney. So as we get started today, we have a day planned for you that's incredible, and we want to welcome you here. But there is a tradition in many cultures where we ask permission of elders, right? You all know this. Many traditions in many cultures is to ask permission from elders because of their wisdom, knowledge, and experience to what? To grant us permission to start the day. And I want to say to you that I believe that we really should be asking that of our students. So I want to ask our students to rise who are here. Any student who is in the house, please stand up. We have students. So my thanks to the students who are here. Students, you are brilliant, wise. You are my teacher. Your experience matters to all of us in this room. And I want to ask your permission that we, as practitioners of community colleges and our partners in the community, if you will give us permission today to look at spaces and what we can be doing across the state to better serve students around basic needs. Do we have your permission to begin? Thank you. Thank you for your permission. I have the distinct honor of welcoming my new chancellor, the amazing Dr. Regina Stanback Stroud, to come and give a welcome today. She's had over 35 years of experience as an educator and a leader, and really, quite frankly, anywhere I go, they know her as a champion of equity, an equity avenger as well, I think. And she, I know. You see, I'm wearing a Laney Love shirt, though. These are, so, Dr. Stroud is, I think, focused, right? She's focused on empowerment, anti-poverty strategies, community and workforce. She has been doing economic development work, regional and state, and is an educator through and through to the core. I mean, you can read her bio, right? Hanging out with Barack, whatever, you know, that kind of stuff. But really, it's a distinct honor to serve under her leadership and to have her come here today to start us off and welcome you all. Dr. Stanback Stroud.
Thank you so much. So formally, I'd just like to say on behalf of the Board of Trustees for the Peralta Community College District, the esteemed faculty and staff of this district, the professional staff here, the students in our East Bay community, I want to welcome you not only to the Peralta Community College District, to Laney College, but to Oakland, California. And then if I just take a point of personal privilege and give my gratitude to my CEO colleagues, my colleague Sarah Goldie-Robb, for the work that they are doing, for engaging in this solution-focused effort to confront the challenges that meets the need, to confront the challenges and meet the needs of students as they present today. Okay. Students who believed us when we said that education was a practice of freedom. Students who believed us when we say that it is the means for upward mobility. Students who believe us when we say that it is the means for preservation of a democratic society. And they believe us and struggle and do that all the while trying to navigate our systems of higher education. And they struggle with things that are basic needs that many of us take for granted or do not have to think about, things like food and shelter, things like health. And while we're living in one of the most affluent nations, and while we even live in some of the most affluent communities, we are witnessing the depth of the impact of poverty. And it is, make no mistake about it, it is a created condition. It is orchestrated by our systems, our policies, our practices, our protocols, our procedures. And it is by design to get exactly the results that we get. So tinkering around the edges is not enough. You know, my mother used to say, there's always room for one more. There's always room for one more. But I think that our problem is bigger than this and requires some greater action. And I think that despite that affluence, and despite the fact that there is enough housing to house the homeless, there is enough food to feed the hungry, but there's not enough political will to make that happen. So you can even see the recent changes in the legislations or the procedures for supplemental nutrition or SNAP, or what we used to call food stamps, will leave hundreds of thousands of more people hungry in the wealthiest, most affluent nation in the world. And we do things that further criminalize that poverty. But this approach, this movement, these efforts right now calls on us to be cognizant of our students' conditions. And we cannot turn an unseeing eye. We can no longer romanticize the notion of college hunger. You know how you tell the story of how you had 9 of you and you all got together and you could only pull up 38 cents because you were trying to buy pizza and stuff. That is a romanticized notion that you see on the movies for many of the communities that don't look like us. And so therefore we can no longer romanticize or sterilize that notion and recognize that students in these communities, in our communities, are suffering for real, that they really do not have enough to eat, that they really don't have a place where they know that they're going to lay their head at night. And instead what we get to do is we get to reconceptualize our notion of what it means to provide an education. If we reconceptualize our notion and the mission of the community colleges and recognize that anti-poverty strategies and work are student success strategies. They are student retention strategies. And in all of the reform that you'll see in education, there are lots of strategies that are put forth. They will change the size of the classroom. They will change all different types of things, how you get in, how you get out, et cetera, but not address the number one factor that impacts the student's ability to get in, get through, and graduate on time, and that is poverty. So this conversation, this work, this movement puts us on the right track. And it holds promise that our communities can and will get it right. As the largest system of higher education in the world, surely we can do something great, something grand, something that matters, something that makes a difference. Because there should always be room for one more. Thank you so much.
So this Basic Needs Conference, I wanted to just give a little history, is actually straight up grassroots effort, right? This is a grassroots effort that started out of the Affordability, Food, and Housing Access Task Force that was established by the chief executive officers of the California community colleges. And I've had the privilege and honor to serve on that task force with many of the CEOs in this room. And so if folks could stand who are on the task force as well. Last year we had this conference at, there we go. Bat Wetstein, Cabrillo College, Byron Breland here, Marta Garcia, Imperial Valley College, and then the 2 equity Avengers that I'm going to introduce now. So we have equity Avengers among us, and we're gonna find out more about that. But these are really a pair, a duo of community college presidents who are working together to address equity in the California community college system. And I'm not going to read through bios or do anything like this. I have to say it's a privilege and an honor to serve with these folks. Keith Curry, Pam Lester, Dr. Lester, you have been not only just incredible colleagues and fighters together, but actually incredible mentors and friends. And I'm deeply grateful for that work. And I'm proud to invite them up as they begin our fireside chat. Thank you.
So just so everyone knows what the Equity Avengers are all about, Pam, Lester, and I started working together when we were on the Community College Athletic Association a couple years ago, working on athletics, and we just built a relationship throughout that work. And we came up with the idea about creating the Equity Avengers because people always ask us to speak. And so our focus on closing the outcome gaps of minority students. and we keep it simple. And everyone is an Equity Avenger. We just started a movement, and we want to continue the movement, and we hopefully that you be a part of the movement and purchase one of our t-shirts on our website for that as well. But we're all Equity Avengers because we're all focused on closing the achievement gap of our minority students.
All right, so we are going to get started here, and then we're going to ask, I am not going to read their bios to you because both Ruben and Sarah have beautiful bios in your programs. And so without further ado, if we could have Dr. Sarah Goldrick-Rab and the magnificent Ruben Canedo join us up here. If you don't follow either one of these people on social media, you should. I learned how to do a Twitter beef from Sarah. So Twitter beefs are fun when people disagree with you about things. But we're going to have you have a seat. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. This is, clearly we didn't rehearse this. Okay. So, the fireside chat this morning is an opportunity to hear from people who are deep, deep, deep in this work and to kick off some of your thinking this morning about where you'll be at the end of the day. And one of the things that I love to say to people, and you've got some operational things in the back of your programs today, is on Monday morning when you get back to your desk after you've thought all weekend about the kinds of things you're going to learn here today, what are the kinds of things that you'll do right away to move your work forward? So I think some of what we're going to hear this morning will be a wonderful introduction to that. So without further ado, I'm going to have Keith ask our first question.
It's the presentations.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sarah, would you like to start?
All right, good morning. It is so cool to see the second, I guess this is the second in a series of Real College California conferences. I want to make sure first that y'all know that you're part also of a national movement. That Real College started, it turns out we just had our 4th anniversary, and it began when we started to write about some of the emerging data that showed that food and housing insecurity was happening to so many students. We wrote about it in the New York Times, and then my email inbox began to fill. And that's how I met Ruben. And that's how I met Rachel from Swipe Out Hunger. And that's how I met so many of you in the room. You wrote to say, we have this problem, we've had this problem, it's been going on, our students have been suffering, and no one's been doing anything about it. And it's precisely because so many people felt so alone in the work that we thought that these sorts of convenings were important. And we had the first one in March of 2016. And since then, big 4 national conferences. And you all are the first, really, at a state level to begin to do your own. And so we're incredibly excited about that. And so on behalf of my team, I want to say thank you for taking that on, because you're deepening the work, and we know that you will do even more than we've been able to do, and you will lead us. So I first want to start with that. Now, Keith, do I have slides? Ooh, we can't see these because of the sun, though. Can you all see it all? Not really. All right. Well, all right. So I'm going to try to, for those of you that can see it, great. Otherwise, I will make sure that you know what it says. I want to start by saying that a central goal of the Real College movement, our hope for the Real College movement, is to begin to redefine what it means to be a student-ready college, to be inclusive of being ready to meet students' basic needs. There's a lot of discussion, we know. For years, people have been talking about these college-ready students. And if people are dropping out of college, we're told it's because the student wasn't ready. I think we all know, especially in the community college space, which accepts 100% of the students that apply, that the idea that the student isn't ready is not right. And so institutions have begun to change. And there are a lot of different reforms that you all are going through and will continue to go through. It's our belief that none of those will be successful unless and until first students' basic conditions of learning are secured. Okay, so just, it gives you some grounding. Now, why is this work so hard? It's hard because of the new economics of college. Many of the things that you're going to be talking about today, you're doing against a backdrop in a moment when actually I thought it was wonderful that the chancellor referenced the holes in the social safety net. But in addition, of course, the changes to the labor market, the fact that work simply doesn't pay, the fact that so many employers are changing students' shifts at the last minute, the fact that so many families aren't sure where their next paycheck is coming from, all of those things form the backdrop of the new economics of college, which is clearly about more than just tuition. And so we have to keep that in mind. Now, I argue that the basic needs insecurity that we're going to be talking about is a symptom of those problems, right? It's not the cause of those problems. And we know from the work that we've been able to do and the work that our colleagues, including Ruben and the team at the University of California system and the folks at the Cal State system, that this problem is very widespread. I know there are those who look at the numbers and see how high the rates of food and housing insecurity are and think maybe that's just not right. Maybe the numbers are just wrong. And I'm here to tell you, after all the years of looking at these data across the whole country, the numbers are not wrong in the sense that they might be too high. If anything, I think we're missing students who are going through these challenges. And just as they are missed in homeless counts in cities, I think they are missed in these surveys. So when we think about the magnitude of this challenge, I want you to anchor in your head that 1 in 2 students is affected, and it may be more. 1 in 2. And if you think about that, I want you to think about that as you think about how hard you want to work to try to identify who needs your services most versus simply providing those universally with a design that anyone could access them because, frankly, the majority actually need them. Now, Keith asked me to say a few words about what we've been learning nationally that can be helpful to you. And I want to tell you that the Real College movement takes its learning from 3 different places. One, of course, we're scientists and we do scientific studies. But we don't do our scientific studies in isolation. We don't go out there and say, let's put on a special pilot program and have everything that happens in the real world stand still while we evaluate it. We draw our lessons from practitioners. And so we have practitioners identify, oh, can you hear me better? Good, okay. Practitioners identify the practices that they find to be most useful, that they think are working the best, and then we go out and we learn from them. The other group that we learn from and that I hope that you are centering in all of your learning are the students. I thought that was a beautiful way to open this morning because, in fact, we are here only because students spoke up and started talking about their challenges, which is how the researchers found out about it, which is how we started to talk about it. And in fact, if you look at the history of campus food pantries and many other initiatives, it has been the students who began, who went first. And so a lot of what we've learned have come directly from those students. The major opportunities that we face at this moment in terms of improving real college work fall into 3 categories. The first is pushing further beyond financial aid to address poverty. Okay? I think we all know that the financial aid system is a hot mess. And I know that some of us are watching the Higher Education Act reauthorization, and we're being told that if they cut the form down, if the FAFSA gets a bit shorter, things will get so much better. You know what? That doesn't change a formula that tells a student who hasn't seen his parents in 2 years, who kicked him out for telling him who he loved, that student has to still rely on their parents' income to qualify for financial aid. Okay? The systemic problems in Title IV hold us up, so we got to push further. Second thing we got to do is we got to increase the extent to which students use our programs. Y'all have good programs. I know you could use more, but the first thing is that the programs that you have need to be utilized by students, and there are so many things right now standing between them and utilization. And then the third thing is to engage strategic partnerships. I'm just going to move out of the sun. Strategic partnerships in a couple of veins, with government agencies and with the private sector. We need all hands on deck. So a couple of real specific examples here. Around program expansion, I want you to think about, of course, your food pantries, but also your emergency aid programs and your efforts to promote the use of public benefits. Having just one, for example, on a large campus is not enough. There need to be programs that have entry points in many different places, especially considering how students utilize our campuses in so many different ways. We also need stronger program coordination, and frankly, and speaking to some of the leadership in the room, we need accountability for how the program functions. Now, I don't mean the heavy-handed accountability that tells practitioners what to do or tells them you're only going to judge them on their outcomes. I mean accountability for ensuring, for example, that we're spending the resources necessary so that the staff can actually spend time with the students, right? If you measure how much a student says they get the interaction that they need from their staff member and consider that an outcome of interest, or if you ask how fast can a student receive emergency aid, not just, does a student retain if they receive emergency aid? You'll begin to hold yourself accountable for the mechanisms that actually ensure that students get what they need. A couple more things, if I can get this to move. There we go. I also think that it's very important that we begin to think about, we've talked a lot about social workers in this movement, and I want to continue to emphasize that the social work approach to case management, rather than the standard student affairs approach to case management, is what's necessary. It centers the whole person. It also engages the student as a partner in the work. It's not something you do to a student, it's something that you do with a student. We also need to be sure that when we talk about money, we're talking about ROI in the right way. A lot of our institutions have been defunded, right? We're operating with too few resources, and it is really easy in that context to look at something like food and think this is a place to make money. Problem with that, if you're really thinking about ROI, is you're undermining your retention goals by pricing food too high. So we got to integrate more variables into our models as we think about the return on the investment. Food is not something that should be used to make profit on a campus. Couple more things. Administrative burden. If you take one thing from my comments today, I want you to take this. The administrative burden on campuses is high for many regards. We know that. Compliance issues, regulatory issues. But the administrative burden on students right now is massive. So, every time that a student has to struggle to learn about a program, every time a student has to struggle to complete an application, every time a student has to struggle to comply with the rules of a program, or even figure out that there are rules, every time a student has to endure psychological stress from going through what the program requires of them, those are all administrative burdens. They all can cut the legs off of a well-intentioned program. And if you begin to look to ensure that your program has minimal administrative burden, you will increase the odds that it will be effective. I'm going to skip through a couple here because I want to get to Ruben. Increasing take-up. Please do as much personalized outreach as humanly possible. We've been testing strategies, and we're finding that any sort of mass email that does not specifically say, "Dear Ruben, I am concerned about your ability to eat every day and stay in college. Please come to our Advocacy and Resource Center." If we do not do that and address it to him, and if we do not send him that email every single month, he is not coming, okay? But if we do that, we've seen increases in utilization rates of programs as high as a 40 percentage point increase, okay? So that is not an expensive thing to do. Another very effective thing to do is to put information about your basic needs programs on your syllabus. Ask the faculty to include a couple of sentences. It is one of the easiest things to do. I know they're busy, they do have time to do this. Couple last things. I think that it's really important. I know housing is a very big concern. It's a concern nationally, and I think you all have particularly difficult struggles. One place to start, though, is to ensure that any housing assistance programs that are available are not utilizing rules that put your students at a disadvantage for getting access. Right? That's a conversation that you can have around alignment of goals that isn't just the hardest fight, which is to build more housing and such, which I know that we need to do, but to at least get with those who are already offering assistance and affirm that you have a shared interest in increasing the number of people who can complete degrees. That would be a starting point. This will pay off And I say this to those in the room who worry that they have to still make the case on their campuses. You can make the social justice argument for this work, and everybody up here can do that with you. I'm going to make the economic case, all right? Flat out, it is cheaper for colleges to keep their students. It is cheaper for colleges to graduate the students they have than to start over with new ones. It is cheaper for colleges to keep students who retain as much financial aid as possible, drawing down on federal dollars. Okay? It is cheaper for colleges to have less stressed out faculty and staff because their learners are in their classrooms showing up ready to learn. It is cheaper to do this basic needs work than to not do it at all. And if Californians want to be positioned to receive federal dollars from pending federal legislation to help with basic needs work, then Californians need to have data in hand and programs that they want to fund. So this will pay off. I think that's why you're here, so I suspect you already know that. All right, those are my remarks, and I'm excited to be up here with these Equity Avengers and be here with you today.
My name is Ruben, he, they, gender pronouns. Half of my time is at UC Berkeley, the other half of my time is at the UC Office of the President, and all of my time is whatever my mom says that we need to do. So I always have to say that, because it doesn't matter how many degrees you have and how old you get, if mama says jump, you jump. Right? And if your boss says jump, you're like, you jump first, and then I'll jump. Anyways, so before I get started, I want to do something with y'all. If you have something in your hands, put it on the table. If you're on your laptop, close that shit. If you are on your phone, put it on the table. Disconnect and be fully present in this moment, okay? I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. And if this connects with you, I want you to stand up if you are able to. And if you're not able to stand up, raise your hand. And if you don't feel that you are in a place where you can do either, then energetically stand or raise your hand. Does that make sense? But I want you to participate. Stand up or otherwise signify if right now you are at the healthiest point in your life, mentally and emotionally. Stand up or otherwise signify. Stay, go ahead. Don't look around the room. Nobody's gonna give you your answer. It's your mental health. Stay standing. How many of you all right now are at the healthiest point in your life physically? Your body is at the healthiest point of your life. Stay standing. Don't sit down if you're saying yes to any of these. I'm doing a health assessment in this space. Okay? Go ahead and flex on them. How many of you all are at your healthiest point spiritually, energetically, and in right relationship with your faith, whatever that is? Stand up or otherwise signify, okay? Now look around the room. For those of you that are standing, can we give them some snaps? Celebrate them. For those folks who are not standing, and you're not standing because you didn't say yes to any of this, look around this room and tap into that sacred energy source, that there are other people that are going through similar experiences and struggles and committed to the same movements of social justice and transformation, and they're moving in the direction of their best health, so that you can tell yourself that A, you're alone, and B, that it's impossible. Does that make sense to folks? Now take a seat. Why do I do this? Because we're here to talk about students, we're here to talk about lives, we're here to talk about our roles, we're here to talk about economic, food, and housing justice, and it's a lot. I'm sure many of you all probably right now are operating with like 3 to 4 hours of sleep. When your ass knows how many hours you need to be at 100%. I'm sure many of you all right now don't have all of the energy that you need to be able to perform at your best. Does that make sense? And man, in a room full of community leaders, some of you have thousands of lives that you are responsible for. Some of you all have hundreds, some of you all have tens, and some of you all have ones that are little, that you are literally molding to see who they're going to become. Does that make sense? So if we in this room are not making the healthier choices that align us with our vessels being able to be at their best, how can we expect to have the best impact in what we are doing? You with me? That's not my presentation, that's for your ass. This is my invitation to say, we gotta take better care of ourselves. We gotta take better care of each other. And this basic needs, transformative justice, whatever it is that you call it that you're here for, is not gonna get any better if we are not centered in health, wellness, and if we don't put healing in front of justice. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. Now let's start. I'm gonna give you 2 offerings from the very beginning. Number 1, if you wanna learn more about healing justice, there's actually a podcast called Healing Justice, and it's absolutely phenomenal. For the last 2.5 years, it completely changed my life. And I wanna offer you a book. If you haven't read Emergent Strategy, I want to invite you to that reading. The book is called Emergent Strategy. It's an incredibly fast book to read, and it has tools and tactics for you to apply to ask yourself, how do I show up in generative, emergent, and transformational ways in whatever work that is that you are doing? Does that make sense to folks? I've been in those learning spaces for 2.5 years, and every single time that I'm in those learning spaces, we just had a 4-day immersion here in Oakland with the author of Emergent Strategy. I am the only person that's in there from higher ed. So I want to invite more folks from the higher ed community to join those learning communities. Does that make sense to folks? Okay, beautiful. Here we go. So I'm here to share a little bit about the California Higher Ed Basic Needs Alliance, which for short we call it CHEBNA. You heard me pause here because one of my sisters, femtors, role models, biggest heroes, Colleen, is here with us. Do you want to raise your hand or otherwise? There you go. That's Colleen right there. Without Colleen, we wouldn't have been able to call ourselves the California Higher Ed Basic Needs Alliance because it would have been just the UC, and then it would have been just the CSU. And we always need to have all 3 together. Look, I'm from Calexico, California. I'm from Coachella, California. I'm from the Imperial Valley and Coachella, and from Mexicali. I'm a border kid through and through. I grew up with dual citizenship, but my mom was undocumented and my father was a resident. That's home. Where we come from, we don't go in like mass to the UC system. That doesn't happen. We don't go in mass to the CSU system. But if we do go in mass somewhere, we go to IVC, Imperial Valley College, right? So all this hierarchy of human value and all this hierarchy of potential and all this hierarchy of institutional value makes no sense to me. Because where I come from, the people that took care of me, my educators, my doctors, my health clinic providers, all went to IVC. And without them, I wouldn't have been here today. So it doesn't make sense to me when we're in the community of higher ed and we do this hierarchy of segmental and human value that makes it all kinds of ego-centered and unhealthy and messed up. Does that make sense to y'all? Cool. So here we go. I probably now have like 2 seconds left. So I'm not gonna get into details of this because Sarah just did an absolutely phenomenal job. But you see, Sarah and I, everywhere that we go, Keith and Pam and all of us that are on this side of the world, we always have to start with the culture shift conversation, which is right now, there is a lot of misinformation and uneducated false truths that are shaping this conversation. Some of them sound like this: financial aid people don't care about students. Financial aid people make it almost impossible for students to get what they need. Financial aid people care more about their jobs in the university than they do their students. The cost of tuition and fees are making college unaffordable. We went through college and figured things out. We struggled, but we made it through. If this generations of students are struggling, they also need to figure things out on their own. And the last one is students have more financial aid and resources than they need. If they're struggling, they're doing something wrong. How many of y'all have heard at least one of these things mentioned somewhere in your worlds? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Look around this room. Right? Put your hands down. We've been doing this conversation for 10 years. There hasn't been a room that we enter where people don't raise their hands. And it's been 10 years. So what we're trying to do is change the culture and say, how do we go from blame culture? How do we go from a misinformed culture? How do we go from a lacking research culture and help people understand that many of these ground level person-to-person realities are actually systemically being produced and not one individual person. So the conversations that we have is financial aid staffers are not an autonomous entity. They're functioning with policies from the campus and the county and the state and the federal, and if they have foundations and individual donors that created a scholarship for the campus, they gotta be responsive to all of those folks. My head hurt just when my mom would say, yes, you can go, and my dad would say, no, you cannot, and I didn't know what the hell to do. I can only imagine what financial aid staff are trying to figure out when all of those systems aren't speaking with each other in a cohesive and coordinated way. Does that make sense to folks? The federal Pell Grant is at a 4-decade purchasing power low. Where it used to be 80%, now it's flirting with like 20. There's less there for today's students. We also, the majority of states haven't recuperated to pre-recession funding for public higher education. California right now has more students than we did during the recession, but we have just about the same money that we did in 2008. It makes no sense. Especially when you look at our defense budget at a federal level, and you see how much money we send to the military and how much money we send to public higher education. But don't get me started there. Does that make sense to folks? Why is it that somebody like me that went to Calexico, grew up in Calexico, why was I getting recruited to go to the military since I was in 5th grade, but I didn't talk to a single college until I was in senior year, the week before I was supposed to apply for college? How do you get to Calexico with the entire military branch, but not one college could go have a conversation with us? You see what I'm saying there? Okay. Now, the cost of living continues to outpace wages, what Sarah said, dramatically showcasing cost of housing. The majority of borrowing is not for tuition and fees, it's for cost of living. So when we say free tuition, and we only talk about tuition, and we only talk about tuition and fees, and we never talk about cost of living, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. We're not moving in the most transformative ways. Students today, right? When people are I hate this part. I keep telling students, you're lazy, you're irresponsible, you're doing something wrong. And it's by older generations that are telling that to rising generations. It's completely unfair and uneducated to come at students that way. Today's students working full-time during the summer and part-time during the academic year, the same exact hours of the generations of the 60s and the 70s, today can only pay for 1/3 of their total cost of attendance. Whereas those generations could actually pay their full total cost of attendance. Students aren't lazier today. They're not working less today. They're functioning in a completely different economy. Does that make sense to folks? And the last one is this. Students are not being prepared, which is what Sarah was talking about. We have this college readiness, but look, I might even do it right here. Raise your hand or otherwise signify how many of y'all went to a high school that made it mandatory for every single student in your high school to pass a class that taught them about personal finance, grocery shopping, meal prepping, cooking, searching for housing, advocating for you to be selected in your housing, your tenants' rights, and just, adulting skills. How many of y'all went to a high school that made it mandatory for every single student in your high school, regardless of their GPA, to learn those skill sets? Raise your hand. 1, 2. One maybe and a half over there? I don't know what's going on. Okay, cool. So it's not happening. Do we agree? But then students get to college and they don't know how to do any of those things, and then we blame them. The economy is different. There are no skill sets. There are no resources to provide to the students at the scale that they need them. But then the student is the problem. You see how none of that makes sense? Cool. So now we're going to go quick. How did we get to CHEBNA, the California Higher Ed Basic Needs Alliance? I always start with this. It was multi-generational relationships. I don't lie to myself. I don't say we created for the first time ever the cross-segmental conversation that's talking about this. We've been talking about this. People have been trying to figure things out across the 3 different segments and trying to get it done together. But little by little, the basic needs conversation in 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, kept growing and growing and growing. And I think I saw Devon here. Is Devon here? There you go. You see Devon back there? Hey. That's Devon. Devon just graduated from the UC system. That man needs to have like a full-ass documentary on his life. He's led every single segment from the student leadership position. Last year, he was our student region. He created a student region council on basic needs, but he also helped us get together the 3 student associations to formalize a collective voice across the student associations, the way that we did at the staff level, so that we could come together and work with partners like Debbie, who's here, and other folks who are here, to go to Sacramento together and say basic needs is a priority for everybody. Hunger, homelessness, poverty should not exist in any campus of any segment, regardless of who you're talking about. And if we don't move in that way, we're doing a disservice, not just to the present time, but also to where the state is headed. You with me so far? The culture had to change and we had to become interdependent. There you go. That's where we are right now. And I'm just going to close it up so we can go into the conversation. Here we go. Sometimes people say that, like, you know, what we're doing works because it's at the grassroots and it's only community-based. That is CCC, that is CSU, and that is UC. Those are the heads. All of them talking basic needs in the state hearing process. So when people say that grassroots efforts and intersectional efforts and interdependent efforts only happen at the community level and not at the executive leadership level, that is not true. If we can start something from the bottom and then the top joins in and everybody's doing together, it's like cooking a delicious Filipino bun. You burn that from the bottom, you burn that from the top, and that shit is delicious in the middle. And that's what we got going on in basic needs. Now, to leave y'all with this as we go into the conversation, I just want to plant these seeds of just questions to guide us in the directions moving forward. I don't have answers. I'm just inviting you to these meditations and to think about how do we embody this every single day, which is, what is the current relational culture across our segments? In your local community, how many segments are represented and what relationships do you have across each other? Does that make sense to folks? Some of us have only community college in the space. There's multiple ones. Some of us have community college and a state school. Some of us have all 3. Do we know each other? Are we in relationship with each other? If one of us have a pantry, all of us should have a pantry. If one of us is doing CalFresh, all of us should be benefiting from that CalFresh. So on and so forth. Second, what value is being imposed upon us and what value are we generating? What are people saying about us versus what is our culture? And how do we affirm each other so that I know how you're being talked about, but right here, there's love. Right here, we thriving. Right? It's kind of like when people growing up used to call me all kinds of names, but I would come home and my mom would say I'm like the greatest gift in life. That shit will balance me out, right? Her little like prayers and stuff on me, they were like my protective cloak when I was going out into the world and people were treating me differently because I was differently abled. That kind of relational is sacred in the way that we move together and forward. Third, how do we move forward with interdependence and transformative justice at our center? One of the saddest things I've ever heard in multiple spaces, and some of you are here when it has happened, I have been in spaces with public higher education leaders, and when I try to use the language of justice, and when I try to use the language of transformation, and when I try to say we have to change the conditions that are causing the problems of today so that we move in better directions, I have literally been told, I don't think we agree as a higher education community if we're here to do justice work. I don't think higher education has ever agreed that we're here to transform the conditions of people and leave it in a better place. I've literally been told that from all 3 segments, from students to faculty to administrators. At some point, we gotta agree. And if we're not agreeing that higher education should have a justice center, then we gotta make a full stop and say, what are we doing here for then? Are we here to reproduce the same conditions of society and just prepare students on how to navigate them? And if so, woof. We need to have like a soul check-in right there. The last one is this. We have to celebrate who's in the room. Do me a favor. If you identify as a first-generation college student or graduate or alum? Stand up. How many of us here are first-generation college students? Okay. Now, how many of us here needed financial aid to make it through college? Stand up or otherwise signify. How many of us, stay standing, don't sit down. If you already stood up, stay standing. I'm trying to do movement work right now. Okay? How many first gen? How many folks needed financial aid? Now, how many folks identify as a person of color? How many folks identify as a person of color? Stay standing. Don't sit down. Hijos de su madre. If you already stood up, stay standing. Don't sit down. How many of us identify as femme, as women? How many of us identify as any of the LGBT plus community memberships? And how many of us have a true commitment to justice? Look around this room. Look who's in the room. I guarantee you that the systemic, institutional, and ideological problems of today that were not built by this room. We're the transformation. That's what's in the room. Thank you all so much.
So as equity Avengers, we're fighting sun. So hopefully everyone understands that we're moving around just to get away from the sun a little bit. But we're still fighting for equity, but the sun is hitting us a little bit harder than we had anticipated. So please work through this with us. What we want to do, Sarah was able to provide the national context and also the work that's being done in California. And then Ruben talks about the coalition building that's happening as well. But what we want to do with this fireside chat is provide an opportunity for you to ask questions. My only question to the group would be about guided pathways and the implementation of guided pathways, but we feel it's more important for you to be able to ask some questions to our panel. So is there anyone that has a question? And President Tamil is walking around with the if you don't ask a question, I will.
I just want to say, it was supposed to be totally raining. Everybody was like, don't worry, Tamil, it's going to be great lighting in there. And then look what happens. The sun came out. All right.
It is great lighting.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kimberly King. I'm a professor in the psychology department at Laney College, and I'm the coordinator of the Umoja program. It's a Black student success program in community colleges. And we also do a lot of anti-poverty work in a group with the Poor People's Campaign. We have a committee here at Laney, and and we deal with housing insecurity and homelessness. It's a huge issue. As a matter of fact, right now, you guys may know there's women who took over a house in West Oakland, and they're being evicted now. Homeless women, 2 homeless moms, basically an investor-owned home that has been empty, and they're just starting to say that we have to start housing. If housing is a human right, then you can't withhold it from people just because they don't have the money to afford it. But the thing I wanted to ask about is, what do you all think about public housing dorms on campuses? Like the idea of, I mean, I want to have dorms for students, but then dorms are very expensive, and you have to maybe try to get bonds, and bonds are very problematic in a number of ways. But have you ever thought of the idea, or is it possible, maybe not under this HUD, but getting public housing dorms, like dorms that are funded and only, people qualify for it who meet Section 8 needs or something like that?
So I can start with my response on this. And most people who know at Compton College, we're looking at building prefabricated housing on our campus. And I truly believe the state of California should be paying for it. California community colleges should have, if they want to, student residential housing, and they have to figure out what it might look like on their campus, and the state should provide funding to support that. Also, there need to be changes in Title V that supports community colleges to be able to use capital outlay and also scheduled maintenance dollars to be able to continue to provide upkeep to your student residential housing. So there's some legislation that we'll be putting in this year through the Community College League of California in regards to the Title V changes. And there's also some work that's being done at Compton College and other colleges in regards to student residential housing. This is a big conversation. Pam and I are leading the task force again. We have to provide recommendations to the Board of Governors by the end of January in regards to student residential housing And so this is a big issue not only for the colleges, but also for the Board of Governors.
I just want to add, on the public housing side, I definitely think that there is some room to maneuver there, and I would recommend taking a look at the Family Scholar House model out of Kentucky, and taking a look at what they've been able to do for student parents. It's not on the campus, but it's literally across the street from the campus. And they have co-located both the affordable housing with HUD funding, along with high-quality childcare on the campus, which they've gotten sort of mixed income contribution to, which is really smart. And there are some who've begun replicating that. The other thing is, from a policy standpoint, we need to push for a change to the low-income housing tax credit nationally so that full-time college students meet the criteria. This will create more incentives for those who do build affordable housing to do so with colleges and nearby colleges that enroll full-time students.
Hey, I think you all are doing some fantastic work. I love the fact that we're putting these food pantries across the campuses, across the state. My big question is, most of our students are coming, they receive free or reduced lunch throughout their high school and elementary years. When is that going to be done at a collegiate level so these students can continue that service that's being provided that's going to ensure their success?
Thank you. So, we made the first official proposal to Congress in 2015 on this issue, and I'm happy to say that it is having some movement. There is some receptivity to it. Of course, right now they're a little busy, but Representative Adam Schiff, who you may be aware of, has introduced a bill called Food for Thought, and his bill is intended to lay the groundwork for the expansion of the National School Lunch Program, first to community colleges, and then to the rest of public higher education. In addition, for the last several years, the Hope Center, along with many of our partners, have been hosting closed-door, off-the-record conversations with the food service providers, the big companies, to try to help them sort out why it's in their interest for this to be happening. And that is an effort to ensure there is bipartisan consensus to advance this. And then here in California, you all are making some progress. Keith, you want to say a word about that?
So California last year in the state budget, Senator Holly Mitchell from Los Angeles included $500,000 reduced program and what that might look like at the community college level. And so Colleen at the Chancellor's office working on that, the research-based that project. So we're making movement in California in regards to the issue. Most people who know me, I talk about food pantries. I love food pantries, but those are a short-term solution to a long-term problem. And the free and reduced lunch program for community colleges will be beneficial to our students. So where's Tamil? I don't see her. Right here.
Anybody have a question?
If you don't ask the question, I will, because I got a couple of minutes.
Go, Keith.
Okay, so
Okay.
I was ready like.
I'm just wondering if you all have any guidance on institutional support for post-secondary trauma that our frontline workers that are helping these students often absorb, and secondarily, where'd you get t-shirts?
I answer that one in a second. The second question.
Can you repeat your question? You said post-secondary trauma for people that are caring for people?
Yeah, for what we call our frontline workers, our coordinators who are working directly with students on chronic homelessness and chronic unemployment and...
Yeah. What are you doing right now?
Crying together. We're trying to develop a case management team, but like modeled after CERT or B-Care. But we were just discussing this yesterday that B-Care is more of like a broken arm where we're dealing with like chronic back issues. And so that intervention isn't really appropriate. So we're looking at other models of how we can develop some sort of case management or support, not just for our students, but for the caregivers and for our educators that are supporting them through their educational journey.
Raise your hand, how many folks would be interested in being part of a circle that's gonna figure that out together? Raise your hand. Okay. Can we find each other during the meal break or one of the transition breaks? I'm gonna ask all folks who are interested in that conversation, come up here to the front so that we can have that conversation. Because I have a lot to say, but I'm not gonna be able to say it all right now, and I also don't wanna make anybody feel that Once I start answering whatever I miss and you already have, I want to tap into that collective wisdom. But that's a conversation that is happening robustly. And it's really, really powerful that we're seeing effective models of folks that have been providing care in the community outside of higher ed. And there's a lot of wisdom in the community that we can be tapping into, from collectives to intergenerational relational circles, so on and so forth. But there's really beautiful conversations that are happening right now that one of my goals is how do we start bridging those spaces? Because they are there to take care of community, but something has happened at some point in the culture of our communities where we don't consider community colleges and universities. And colleges and universities don't consider community the communities that they're a part of. Does that make sense? It's really fascinating. So that in itself is going to be culture shifting work as well. But excuse me, for folks that are interested in that conversation, come up here to the front after this so that we can find each other.
In regards to the shirt, talk to Pam and I about the link, and we can be able to provide that to you. We'll put it up. So I got like a minute, Tamil, like a second? 1 minute, okay. Before Pam has the last question, I got my one question. I got to ask this question to Sarah. It's the big elephant in the room, or the big conversation in California is about guided pathways, and Sarah has some good thoughts on this. How do we address student basic needs as we implement guided pathways in California?
The answer is you do it. And you do it, and you're not going to have guided pathways work be successful unless you're doing it. So I think that I think honestly that this initiative has swept nationally, and if it's to be successful, if any of that work is to occur, this is the first part. And so it needs to be embedded from the very beginning and throughout. And I think that the attention, I really appreciate the last question in particular. One of the things the Hope Center will be releasing this spring is the first time ever we have actually surveyed the faculty and the staff's basic needs at 10 colleges that are especially brave, and that includes you all, if I remember this correctly, right? And so I think that, you got to ask about the folks doing the guided pathways work too and what they're going through. So I think it's absolutely essential.
Just something really quick on that. I don't want to assume who's in the room, and I also don't want to assume what rooms you're going after this. There are some rooms where there are people who are actively saying basic needs is not the responsibility of higher education. Basic needs is not the responsibility of colleges and universities. That is county responsibility, that is city responsibility, that is social services responsibility, that is nonprofits that do that, but we do not do that. And sometimes that might not be said, but it's acted upon. So I want to invite you all that if that is still the belief of the people who are influencing and shaping and leading, that you have to come up with a strategy to change that belief. And that is more a belief intervention, not a direct services intervention. And it has to be a community approach to do that work. If not, you're always going to be having to serve and fight back your own institutional leadership. Does that make sense to you all? There are still college presidents right now, chancellors, CEOs, all of this language that we use depending on the different segments, who are still showing up to work saying, blaming the student, not believing that basic needs is something that needs to happen, but then immediately after they will say something like this: that is not on us to do, that is not our responsibility, but we need to make sure that these students are showing up to class. We need to make sure that these students are persisting. We need to be making sure that students are performing, and we need to make sure that students are graduating. But basic needs is not our responsibility. And they don't hear themselves how that makes no kinds of sense. One of the best shirts that the Hope Center has done, and one of the go-to things that we always say, is that students are human first. You wake up as a human, and then you take on all the identities that are imposed upon you by society and the institutions that you are a part of. But that student is not going to show up, persist, perform at their best of abilities, and graduate if their basic needs are not met.